So I just say hello again, greet everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my Dhamma friends. Questions? So it's a tricky question, and I'm going to say some general things because it sounds like a simple enough question, but the problem is these kind of signs of development of meditation are subjective. So different people will experience progress differently. So in general, when talking about deepening levels of metta or peacefulness or insight, I would prefer to know the practitioner, and I would prefer to know what are they doing, what have they been doing, what methods are they using. And then I would like to ask them how they used to experience their meditation, how they're experiencing it now, to get a sense for where the person's at. And so we have to be a little bit careful in giving general answers because sometimes a different practitioner needs an answer which is suitable for them, for where they're at. And so that would be my preference as a teacher, is to know a person and to know their practice. But in general, how do you know if the metta meditation is developing? So it starts as intention, and then it starts as wholesome thoughts directed on the theme of loving kindness, and then feelings of loving kindness, mental feelings, emotion of loving kindness arises. And as that intention to have that altruistic, sincere wish becomes more and more focused, more and more pure in a way, then the thoughts can drop away and there can just be this energy of loving kindness, which is very bright and warm, and it will feel larger, like it is established and it's radiating. And then it's just a matter of dropping in the occasional thought to direct the metta in certain directions. So starting with people that it's easy to feel loving kindness towards, and then neutral beings, difficult beings is how it's traditionally taught to train in, and then increasing to include eventually all beings. And so metta can lead to jhanic absorption, at which point there wouldn't be any discursive thought. There would just be that very, very powerfully present feeling and energy of loving kindness. Most people's metta bhavana isn't at that level. So most people have to direct loving kindness towards themselves and then a few beings, and then it kind of, for a lot of people, fizzles out a bit. And you have to come back to the breath, recharge the clarity, the collectedness, intend to spread loving kindness again, include more beings. And that's fine. It's fine to kind of alternate between breath and metta, but you'll have that sense for when you're kind of overextending or trying too much and it's just not happening sometimes. But then you just come back to the breath, rest, set the intention to radiate loving kindness, establish it for oneself, and then radiate. One mistake I think many people make is that might slow down development is that they send the mind out. They imagine sending the mind out. So suppose you have a friend in London and you're trying to send your mind to London, you're trying to send your loving kindness to London. And then you'll find that after a couple of minutes, there's no more metta to send. And so you don't need to do that. You think of the person who you're spreading loving kindness towards, and you visualize their face in front of you, and you imagine them smiling, and you just have the intention to wish that person well. And then mind is a very powerful thing. It's not bound by space and time in the same way that the four elements world is. So I think trusting the power of metta, and trusting the nature of minds, that when you have the intention, when you bring to mind, you bring to your mind that being with that intention, that's the most effective way, in my experience, to spread loving kindness to a person. You can radiate loving kindness from your body to some distance, but don't try to send it to the other side of the world. Don't need to do that. And similarly, when you think of neutral beings, you bring them to your mind. And the same with all beings. You're just kind of including all beings in this space, in your mind. Because you're trying to condense, distill, concentrate loving kindness here. And so bring them to your mind. And that's very helpful. With breath meditation, this is where its different character is a little bit different. So some people, when the mind's becoming peaceful with the breath, some people see light, white or gold. Some people see orange, blue, purple. When the mind is collecting a bit, they might get a kind of a light in the mind's eye. Eyes are closed, but in the mind's eye, there's a kind of or sometimes just a sense of light, a blank. That's good. It's a good sign. But other people don't get a light nimitta. And Ajahn has told me that when the mind is truly peaceful, if it's in an absorption, there won't be light. So it'll just be a very, very palpable sense of presence and no more thoughts, for it to be jhana based on breath meditation. Another thing that can slow people down with breath meditation, slow development down, is fear. So what happens as breath meditation develops is that the spaces between the breaths get longer. That's normal. That's because your mind is becoming peaceful, and your body is still, and your body doesn't need much oxygen because it's not doing any exercise, and your mind's not using up a lot of energy because it's not going out the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, thoughts about the past and future. So the breath gets finer and the spaces between get longer. And then sometimes the breath appears to stop. And that's a point where a lot of people get scared and they breathe deeply. And you shouldn't do that. So what's actually happening at that time, sometimes the breath does stop. But if you just trust the peacefulness, there's a certain point where this faith, spiritual power is important. You trust the peacefulness. And then the breath comes back. You might take, after what seems like 30 seconds or a minute, you might take a deeper breath, and then the breath is there. But just trust that the body will breathe when it needs to breathe. And then another thing that can happen is that the breath gets finer and finer and finer, and it really seems to disappear. And then in that case, it's probably the case that the breath has become very fine and the mind is turning inwards. So when the mind turns away from the sense spaces, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, feelings, and it turns inwards, what's occurring is that it's not aware of the feelings involved with the breathing, but the breathing is still there. But it's very subtle. So the breath gets more subtle and the mind gets more peaceful. And what happens is the mindfulness takes the peacefulness as the object. So it stops giving its interest in the breath. So the breath led the mind to a peaceful state. And then the mind picks up the peacefulness as the meditation object. This is very, very wholesome. and you can totally trust this. And a lot of people think, oh my God, I'm going to die. I need to breathe. And they come out of that peaceful state. So as far as I'm aware, I don't know anybody. I've been a monk for 24 years. I don't know anybody who died of breath meditation. So you can trust that it's not the case that your breath will stop and you'll die. And it's really important, actually. It's really important to develop this sense of trust. Because what's happening there is a sense of letting go. There's this self-view which is so pervasive that we interpret everything as a self. So this self-view is grasping at the body and grasping at the mind and grasping at sense perceptions and grasping at thoughts as my body, my feelings, my thoughts, my emotions, even my kilesas, my hindrances, my paramis, my metta, my everything. And for the mind to become peaceful, you need to let go of it. And it's really important to understand that this is the thing that causes us so much suffering. And it's actually the thing that we want to get some space from. We want to have a break from it. We want to be liberated from it. And as soon as you get a couple of moments of being liberated from it, you're like, oh no, go back and grab it all again. Don't do that. Let it go. Trust the peace, trust the stillness, and rest. And then what will happen is that the mind will get full of peacefulness, and then it will come out of that state by itself, and the feeling of a self comes back all by itself. You don't have to worry. It doesn't die that easily. And then you'll be thinking about my wonderful meditation that I just had, or tell all your friends what a great meditation you just had. So anyway, too much desire mind is also an obstruction in breath meditation. So in a way, we have to meditate a lot with the aspiration to develop concentration with the breath as the object. And we have to be patient with the process, and we have to have quite a large amount of contentment with the level of peacefulness and the capacity that we have. Because patience and contentment combined with effort is what will bring about peacefulness. But sitting with impatience and sitting with desire is the 5 hindrances. Impatience is probably in the aversion spectrum, and wanting jhana is the first hindrance, craving. So a certain amount of effort. Chanda means aspiration. We have the aspiration that's wholesome, and then that's what gets you to your pillow. And once you get on your meditation mat, your meditation pillow, you actually have to put it down. So it's good to have the aspiration and the desire. Get to your zafu, get to your zabuton. Once you're on your zafu, your zabuton, put down your desire for peaceful mind states and just place your awareness on the feelings of the breathing consistently, patiently. And when some peacefulness arises, be content. And that is the attitude that will deepen your breath meditation. And if the spaces get longer, that's good. Another kind of a trick to learn or skill to learn is staying in the center of the experience, even in the spaces. So a lot of people have this experience, so they're aware of the in-breath and then the mind kind of flies out slightly. And then they're aware of the out-breath and then the mind kind of flies outwards slightly. So it's like, keep wherever it is that you're watching your breath, you keep the base of your awareness at that area. So if it's your nose, in the space, you're still aware of the neutral feelings at the nose. Or if it's in the heart area, in the space, you keep your presence of mind centered in that area. This will help your mind to gather and collect. Whether you have jhana or not, most people don't. So a lot of people overestimate when they do start to experience some peacefulness. So it's peacefulness is wholesome. I don't have anything negative to say about peacefulness. And whatever peacefulness that you have, that's wonderful. You should rejoice in your mind's wonderful potential. But then it's important to understand that there is temporary concentration. So that's like a peaceful mind state for about 5 minutes. neighborhood concentration, so peaceful mind state, for 15 or 20 minutes with only wholesome thoughts. So if your mind after 40-minute or a 1-hour meditation, your mind becomes peaceful for about 20 minutes and there's only a few thoughts quite wholesome, that's probably Upacara Samadhi. But it's important to understand that Upacara Samadhi, according to Tanajana Nan, has a coarse, an intermediate, and a refined level. And so some people might go from the coarse to the intermediate, and they might think that's first jhana. They might go from the intermediate to the refined, and they might think that that's the second jhana. And personally, I think you don't need to know what it is, because if it is jhana, there's not going to be a sign there that suddenly manifests and says, "You got jhana. This is jhana." It's not like that. What we're talking about is different gradations of a collected, still, peaceful mind. And the sense of self will get less and less and less, because what Samma Samadhi is doing is it's suppressing in a skillful way proliferation, thought formations. So if it really is jhana, that just means it's an unshakable quality of peace and presence. If it's jhana based on breath meditation with no thought at all, and then probably not feeling the feelings of the breath either at all, because what has happened is the collected, peaceful presence of mind is called the mind as unification. So the mind unifies or collects, and the intensity of that collectedness becomes the meditation object, and it's still and stable and unshaking for a period of time. And then the mind will move from that naturally, and there'll be awareness of the breath again, and it'll go from that state to neighborhood concentration, some thoughts, etc. With regard to Vipassana, so there are these things called the Vipassana Jnana, which are, I'm not that much of a scholar, so I'm not sure exactly how many there are, but there are suttas which will tell you exactly how many Vipassana Jnanas there are. But in terms of, I have had a few Vipassana Jnana in my meditation experience, so in terms of how I've experienced that, is you will see one of the characteristics, anicca, dukkha, or anatta. You will see one of those very clearly, and then there'll be a sense of letting go. The self-view isn't there. There's an experience of emptiness. What do I mean by emptiness? Presence of mind and awareness with no interpretation of phenomena being a self. So the self-view isn't in the mind for a period of time. And what Ajahn Nan explains, that if you experience anicca, you see anicca impermanence very, very clearly, or you see dukkha very, very clearly, you see anatta very, very clearly. What happens is in the next moment, you actually see all three. When you see anicca, it's like, oh, it's not self, letting go of self. When you're seeing the anatta, you also see, well, this is dukkha. We're putting it down because it hurts. The experience is emptiness. So what the experience in Vipassana Jnana is an experience of emptiness of self, emptiness of permanence. And so but it is a fairly profound letting go. And it's the pleasure that comes from a true insight into any of the three characteristics is described as superior to the pleasure that comes from the jhanic states. So, and the merit that it produces is superior as well. So for it to be a real Vipassana Jnana, it's quite a profound sense of letting go, and quite a profound sense of really experiencing emptiness of self, emptiness of permanence. And it gives, gives you a lot of confidence in the nature of the mind, that you can trust the nature of the mind, that when you let go of the things that cause you suffering, what you will experience is a very, very deep peace, a sense of fullness and contentment, but no sense of self. So it's like the sense of self is so pervasive, it's like the fish swimming in the water, it doesn't know what water is. It's just swimming. And we need to have these vipassana jnana, because when you experience the body and the sense spaces without interpreting it as a self at all, then you really begin to trust there is something else which is better than interpreting the world in terms of a self. And then you develop a lot more confidence in the nature of mind and in the reality of nibbana. And then the vipassana jnanas, if a person continues to practice, and if their aspiration is to become a stream enterer, then the next level of development is one might glimpse nibbana, actually have an experience of nibbana. And then in the time of the Buddha, as we read, a lot of monks had that experience and then were liberated. They got nibbana, path and fruit. But that's because of a lot of past practice. Most modern practitioners, they will progress through khanika samadhi, momentary samadhi, neighborhood concentration, and they'll begin to have insights, most people, while they're in the neighborhood concentration area. And after significant insights, they probably develop the jhana. And then with the first jhana, with that more stable concentration, there's more power to the investigation. They can have some experience of the nibbana element. And so, and then we'll progress from a temporary liberation to even what's called a gotrabhu vijnana. It's called a change of lineage, where the mind absorbs the nibbana experience, but it comes back before it changes to be a stream enterer, because of the power of karma and the power of clinging. But the mind has seen nibbana, and so from that point has great faith and confidence, has experienced, in nibbana there's no four elements, and there's no self-view. So it's a radiant, luminous experience of emptiness with no four elements and no self. But there is something experiencing that, mind. And then that gives people great confidence and energy, continue in their practice. And then, but from the merit of the gotrabhu vijnana, it's said that the person will become a stream enterer before they die, sometimes during the death process. And then if a person has the spiritual powers, the spiritual faculties developed enough, they can attain to sotapanna, stream entry. And Ajahn says the stream entry experience, the mind has changed and it's experiencing that emptiness of self and that reality of nibbana. He says for about 3 days for it to be the real thing. So it's a bit tricky because there's a lot of misinterpretation. A person might have a vipassana jnana, they really did see anicca, dukkha and anatta, they really did experience some emptiness of awareness, and they think they're a stream enterer. It's like, no, that was a vipassana jnana. And a person might be experiencing Ujjara Samadhi, neighborhood concentration, and they're thinking it's a jhana. The person is experiencing growth and development, they're practicing well and they're getting some good results. But if we then interpret that, I have jhana, I'm a stream enterer, it's like, it's Mara. Mara's coming back with more self-view. And the result of having jhana or being a stream enterer should be less sense of self, and having seen through the self and not trusting it. Actually, don't trust the self-view, the way it interprets everything in an egoistic way. So trust emptiness, trust awareness, trust the Dhamma, trust the Buddha, trust the Arahants, and you understand self-view as a view. A stream enterer would understand that it's a view, it's a habitual way of seeing things which is not the truth, it's a convention, a mental construct. And the deeper truth is emptiness. So, but as I said, in terms of checking where an individual practitioner is and what their level of metta is, what their level of samadhi is, what their level of insight is, I would have to know that person. I'd have to ask a few questions. I'd have to see what they've been practicing, how much they've been practicing, what the texture of their experience is, etc., etc. But I was happy to share that much, and I hope it's helpful, give some pointers. With regards to the Bodhisattva practitioners, I'm going to mention this because there are a good number of you in Malaysia and Singapore. So the Bodhisattva practitioner won't become a stream enter, obviously, but the Bodhisattva practitioner can experience Nibbana. So that's what Ajahn will talk about, the temporary liberation. In Pali, it's called Tatanga Vimutti. So as a person, this is important as well, like if you've made Mahayana vows in a past life, if you haven't relinquished those yet, your mind will not absorb into Nibbana because you have an active vow that's binding you to samsara. It might be very wholesome. It's the most altruistic desire. You're desiring the happiness of others, but it will stop your mind from absorbing in Nibbana. It will stop your mind from becoming established in liberation because a Bodhisattva practitioner has made the vow not to become established in liberation because they are going to build parami and merit so that they could liberate all beings, or as many beings as possible, on the path to Buddhahood. But that practitioner, so what will happen is as the samatha and vipassana progresses, the Bodhisattva practitioner will have vipassana jnana, insight knowledges, and they can experience temporary liberations. And then the mind will be at that point where the barami is at a certain point. There's enough spiritual powers, there's enough merit, there's enough of the 5 spiritual powers to either go into stream entry, no more than 7 lives, or it's going to go into the path of the bodhisattvas, which is the bodhisattva bhumi. And so the practitioner will know when they get to that point which way they want to go, because the bodhisattva practitioner is huge, vast compassion and a very, very deep commitment to benefiting many beings. So it's not going to want to go on the shortcut. The bodhisattva practitioner wants nibbana, but wants to take as many beings with them as they can. But you just practice as sincerely as you can, and then when you get to that point, you will know. Fed up with the conditions, really want liberation, practice more and more and more and more and more. Okay, the mind will go to Nibbana. Or such gratitude to the Buddha, such love of the Buddha, you want to be just like the Buddha. You've experienced and benefit from practice, you feel so grateful. You want all beings to experience that benefit. It's a different kind of a character trait. And so you just practice as much as you can, sincerely as you can, and when you get to that point, the decision will make itself. And then you will be more committed to that path than before even. But the Bodhisattva practitioner can have experience of Nibbana, but the mind will not relinquish its attachment to samsara, and the attachment to samsara is the well-being of other beings. So it will come back from that experience. But it will know Nibbana is real, and Nibbana is superior, say the wise. And so I hope that was helpful.